Commander Alden Rourke walked through the wreckage without slowing, his jaw tight, his uniform stained in places he hadn't had time to wash. He ignored the eyes that followed him, the whispered questions about what they were going to do next. He had no answer that would make sense to anyone who hadn't been inside the ship. Behind him, Rebecca Donnelly kept pace, her stride sharp despite the limp she had earned hours earlier. She didn't speak, not yet. Rourke could feel the weight of her stare though, the way she studied him like she was waiting for him to crack open and admit what had happened. They stopped in front of it. The black ship sat in silence, suspended by magnetic clamps, its hull swallowing every flicker of light in the hangar. Even damaged, even scarred, it radiated a wrongness that made the air heavy. The other captured alien craft had looked like machines. This one looked like a wound in space itself. Rourke rested his hand on the rail, staring at the jagged surface of the vessel. The moment his palm pressed the steel, a pulse throbbed through his bones. It was faint, but alive. Rebecca noticed his grip tighten. "You felt that too, didn't you?" Her voice was low, almost accusing. Rourke didn't answer. "You boarded it," she pressed. "That thing could have killed all of you, but instead, it let you walk out. But what the hell did you do inside?" Her words dragged the memory back, sharper than he wanted. The corridors of the black ship had not been corridors at all but something organic, something that shifted beneath his boots as though the ship itself was breathing. His team had cut their way through chambers where walls whispered, where light bent, where men fired at shadows that weren't there. And in the heart of it, something had reached for him. Not with claws, not with weapons, but with intent. "It chose us," Rourke muttered, almost to himself. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Ships don't choose. Commanders do." He finally turned to her, meeting her glare. There was no sarcasm in his tone, no attempt to soften the truth. "Then maybe it's not a ship." Before she could answer, the hangar's alarms flared. Doors slammed shut, and warning lights splashed crimson across the walls. Voices shouted over comms, frantic and uneven. Brian Maddox, grease still smeared across his cheek, came sprinting in from the maintenance bay, clutching a data pad like it might break apart in his hands. He didn't bother with protocol, just shoved the pad at Rourke. "It sent out a signal," he said, breathless. "Not to us. To everything else out there." Rourke skimmed the display. The pulse was already traveling. A beacon carried on frequencies no human had ever seen before. Rebecca stepped closer, her face pale. "What kind of signal?" Maddox shook his head. "Call. I don't know if it's for help or for company, but it wasn't asking permission." The silence that followed was worse than the alarms. Rourke looked back at the black ship, its surface rippling faintly like skin beneath a heartbeat. It wasn't finished with them. Not even close. The command deck of the carrier Resolute felt smaller than it ever had, even with its wide transparent panels giving a sweeping view of space. Alden Rourke stood at the center, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the silent monster tethered outside the hull. The black ship floated like a corpse that refused to sink, every line of it radiating a predatory patience. Behind him, the crew whispered as if the thing could hear them. Maybe it could. Rebecca Donnelly stepped beside him, her arms folded tight. "Command says the Kerich are mobilizing. 6 fleets on course for the inner colonies. They're calling it retaliation." Rourke didn't look at her. Retaliation for what? She gave a dry laugh that held no humor. "You really need to ask? We brought their nightmare back from the grave. Doesn't matter what we did or didn't do, Alden. To them, we lit the match." He didn't answer, but his jaw clenched. She was right, but he wasn't about to admit it. The door hissed open, and Brian Maddox stumbled in with a bundle of cables and an old-fashioned toolkit hanging off his shoulder. He looked like hell, eyes red from lack of sleep, hair stuck up in ways that had nothing to do with style. He slapped his pad onto the table with enough force to rattle the coffee mugs. "I ran the scans 3 times, he said, voice cracking with frustration. "Whatever that thing did, it didn't just send out a ping. It linked. We're getting ghost data bleeding into our own systems, like it's rewriting code while we watch." Rebecca leaned forward. "You're saying it's inside our ship?" "Inside, under, through, take your pick," Brian muttered. Every firewall we have might as well be tissue paper. And it's not even trying. This is casual for it. Rourke turned his head slowly. Can you stop it? Brian met his eyes and gave the faintest shake of his head. I can slow it down. That's all. The room went quiet. Even the hum of the carrier's engines seemed to fade under the weight of those words. Then the comms officer spoke up, her voice breaking the silence. Incoming transmission. KH Alliance flagship. They're demanding to speak directly to you, Commander. Rebecca swore under her breath. Of course they are. The hollow display lit, filling the room with the towering figure of a KRYH warlord. Its scaled skin glistened under the light, its eyes burning with contempt. The voice that came through was deep, guttural, but perfectly clear thanks to translation. Human, it said, you have bound yourselves to the cursed vessel. You have reignited the terror that consumed 1,000 systems. Surrender it to us now, or every star you claim will burn. No one moved. The weight of the threat pressed down on the room, suffocating. Rebecca leaned closer to Rourke, her voice low so the transmission wouldn't catch it. Don't provoke him. Not now. But Rourke stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. This ship is ours now. And if you come for it, you'll find out just how much of its power we're willing to use. The KRYH warlord's lip curled, revealing sharp teeth. Then you will not survive the year. The feed cut. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Rebecca turned on Rourke the second the screen went dark. Do you hear yourself? You just painted a target on every human colony in range. He wasn't bluffing, Alden. The cave won't stop until we're ash. Rourke's eyes stayed locked on the void beyond the glass, where the black ship hovered like a silent witness. They were going to come anyway. At least now they'll know we won't crawl. Brian dropped into a chair, rubbing his temples. You talk like it's some great stand, but we're outgunned, outnumbered, and now babysitting a ship that rewrites our code for fun. You think that thing is going to fight for us? You don't even know what it wants. Rourke finally turned, his voice sharp. I don't care what it wants. I care what we need. And right now, we need something that scares the galaxy more than the KR would do. Rebecca shook her head. And if it scares us more? For the first time, Rourke hesitated. The words stuck in his throat, but before he could force out an answer, alarms screamed through the deck. The comms officer shouted, multiple cage signatures on long range. They're dropping out of warp right on top of us. The deck lurched as the carrier adjusted position, the crew breaking into controlled chaos. Orders flew, systems came online, and the stars lit up with the first signs of enemy vessels emerging. Rebecca grabbed the rail, her knuckles white. They're early. Damn it, Alden, they're already here. Rourke's eyes went to the black ship, its surface rippling faintly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. He knew then, with the kind of certainty that burned in the gut, that whatever choice they thought they had was already gone. The ship had made it for them. And it wanted war. The carry ships unfolded from warp like claws ripping through space. Their hulls burned crimson against the dark, shields bristling, weapons already locking on target. Within seconds, the empty void around the Resolute was filled with hostile signatures. On the command deck, tension snapped taut. Crew members scrambled at their stations, reports shouted over one another, alarms painting everything in a glow of blood-red light. Rebecca Donnelly slammed her hand against the console, eyes darting across the tactical display. 20 ships. No, 30. And more still coming through. Brian Maddox muttered under his breath, eyes glued to his pad. We're dead. We're absolutely, mathematically dead. Alden Rourke ignored them both. His gaze was fixed on the black ship tethered outside. The moment the carriage fleet had arrived, the thing had started to stir, its surface rippling like a muscle flexing before a strike. It wasn't waiting for orders. It was hungry. Detach the clamps, Rourke said, his voice cutting clean through the chaos. Rebecca turned on him. Are you insane? We don't even understand half of what it does. If you unleash it now, they'll tear this carrier apart in minutes, Rourke snapped. We don't have a choice. Brian shook his head violently. That's not a ship, Alden. It's a weapon with a mind of its own. You let it off the leash, you don't get to put it back. Rourke stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Then we make sure it's leashed to us." Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she gave the order. The clamps released, and the black ship drifted free into the void. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The carriage closed in, weapons charging. The Resolute braced for impact. Then the black ship moved. It didn't accelerate like a human craft. It lunged, vanishing and reappearing in the space between enemy formations. Its hull shimmered with impossible geometry, light bending and breaking as if reality itself bent to let it pass. The first KH cruiser never fired a shot. Its shields dissolved on contact, its hull imploded inward, and then, nothing. Not wreckage, not debris. The ship simply ceased to exist, as though it had been swallowed whole. Gasps rippled across the deck. Even Rebecca froze, unable to look away. Brian's voice cracked. That wasn't a kill. That was consumption. The black ship turned on another target, then another, each attack more ruthless than the last. KH formations broke, panic spreading through their ranks. In minutes, a fleet that had once seemed overwhelming was reduced to chaos. But the silence that followed each destruction was worse than the battle cries. No explosions, no fire, just void where living crews had been. Rebecca whispered, "What the hell did we just unleash?" Rourke didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest was tight, his pulse in sync with the ship's movements, as if each kill reverberated through his own veins. The connection was undeniable, and it terrified him almost as much as it thrilled him. The Kerwa pulled back, their retreat frantic and disorganized. Within minutes, the survivors had fled into warp, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Humanity's first decisive victory should have brought cheers, but the bridge of the Resolute was quiet. Rebecca broke it, her voice sharp. "That wasn't survival, Alden. That was slaughter." Rourke turned, meeting her glare. "We won." She stepped closer, fury in her eyes. "At what cost? Those ships are gone. Not wrecked, not broken, gone. You saw it. It feeds on them." Brian slammed his pad on the table. "She's right. I ran the readings. Every time it consumed a ship, its energy level spiked. This isn't defense. It's feeding itself." The words hung heavy in the air. Rebecca's voice lowered. "And you feel it, don't you? Every move it makes. Every kill. That's why you're not afraid." Rourke looked away, but the truth was written across his face. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was inside him now, breathing through him, pulling at something deep in his gut. And part of him wanted more. The crew stared out at the silent shape drifting near the carrier, its surface alive with faint pulses, like veins glowing beneath skin. It wasn't celebrating victory. It was waiting. Rebecca spoke again, softer this time. "If we keep using it, Alden, we're going to become what the KRH already think we are." Before he could answer, the black ship rippled. The display screens on the bridge lit up with a surge of unknown data, flooding faster than anyone could process. Brian's face went pale. "It's not done. That signal it sent earlier, it wasn't just a call. It was an invitation." Rebecca stiffened. An invitation for what? The lights flickered, the deck hummed, and outside the viewport, space itself seemed to shiver. The black ship was no longer alone. Space tore open in a way no human sensor could predict. One moment the void was silent, the next it crawled with shapes too vast and too old to belong to anything but legend. Dozens of black ships emerged. Each was larger, more jagged, more alive than the one humanity had bound. They moved with no thruster trails, no signatures, only a terrible fluid grace that made them feel less like machines and more like predators arriving to a kill. On the bridge of the Resolute, every voice fell silent. The only sound was the hum of systems straining to make sense of what they were seeing. Brian Maddox's face drained of color. It called its family. His words barely carried. And they all came. Rebecca Donnelly gripped the rail, forcing her voice steady. "How many?" The tactical display stuttered as if refusing to calculate. Numbers climbed past 50, then 100. It kept rising. Rourke stood rigid, his gaze fixed not on the screens but on the void itself. He could feel them. Each ship throbbed like a drumbeat in his skull, syncing with the pulse of the one tethered to him. His chest rose and fell in rhythm he couldn't control. Rebecca noticed the tremor in his hand. She stepped closer, speaking low. "Alden, tell me you're still in control." His lips parted, but before he could speak, the comms cut through with a priority override. The hollow display flared to life, and the room filled with the image of beings most of the galaxy had prayed were extinct. The Valen Dominion. They weren't the skeletal myths whispered by smugglers or the shadowy figures in old archives. They were flesh and steel fused together, tall, elegant, terrifying in their stillness. Their eyes glowed with the same faint pulse as the black fleet outside. The voice came smooth, measured, and cold. "Humans, you have done well. The black ship was abandoned when it failed us, and yet you awakened it. Now you awaken all of them. You are no longer prey. You are the knife." No one breathed. Rebecca broke the silence, her tone sharp with fury. "We are not your knife. We don't serve you." The Valen tilted its head slightly, like a teacher humoring a child. "You already do. The bond is forged. The ship feeds through you. Each time it consumes you. What you call will is only hunger." All eyes turned to Rourke. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't deny it. Brian pushed forward, voice rising with anger and fear. "You used the ships as cages, didn't you? They weren't just weapons, they were prisons. You locked something inside them." The Valen's smile was slight, unnerving. "You are clever, human. They are prisons. But prisons rot without wardens. Now you will be those wardens. Or you will be the rot." The transmission cut. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence felt suffocating. Rebecca was the first to speak, turning on Rourke. "You knew. You felt it since the first battle. You can't hide it. Every kill makes you stronger, but it's not you, Alden. It's the ship." Rourke's eyes snapped to her, raw with conflict. "And what choice do we have? You saw what happened when we fought without it. We lose. Every damn time. This thing gives us a chance." Brian slammed his fist on the console. "It's not giving you a chance, it's turning you into it. Look at yourself, Alden. You're half a breath from calling this a blessing. That's exactly what they want." Rourke's voice dropped, almost a growl. "Better a monster that survives than prey that dies screaming." The words hung like ash. Rebecca's voice cracked, anger laced with sorrow. "And when there's nothing left of you, when you're just a mouthpiece for that thing, do you think the rest of us survive then?" The bridge lurched as the KRH fleet reappeared, their forces doubled, joined now by smaller alien allies who had thrown in everything they had. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. It was the galaxy uniting against them. Tactical officers shouted readings, reports flooding in. Dozens of enemy ships, then hundreds. Humanity was surrounded. Rebecca grabbed Rourke's arm, her voice fierce. "We still have a choice. Cut the bond. Sever it before it takes more than ships. We can't fight the entire galaxy and the Dominion at the same time." Rourke looked at her, then at Brian, then at the black ship pulsing outside, calling to him, promising survival. His voice was steady when he spoke. "Prepare to engage." Rebecca recoiled, her eyes wide with disbelief. But Rourke didn't waver. In his chest, the black ship's heartbeat thundered. And for the first time, he didn't know if it was his own anymore. The hangar bay was chaos. Crews shouted over the screech of pressurized hatches sealing, the hiss of leaking hydraulics, the pounding roar of ships preparing for launch. Above the din, the great black ship loomed like a shadow given steel and engines, its bulk swallowing the docking cradle whole. Spotlights slid across its jagged hull, revealing scars that looked less like battle damage and more like the vessel itself had fought against existence. Alden Rourke forced his way through the crowd with Rebecca Donnelly close behind, both of them cutting past mechanics and Marines loading supplies. His jaw was tight, his uniform half torn from the earlier skirmish in the command bay, but his steps were steady. There was no time to hesitate. Humanity had tied itself to the black ship, and now it was calling in the debt. Rebecca matched his pace, her breath ragged, her face pale from exhaustion. "If we step onto that thing, there's no turning back. You know that." "Was there ever a turn back?" Alden shot back, his eyes fixed on the ship. They brought it to us. They left us with nothing but a choice between fear and use. And we chose use. Brian Maddox was already ahead of them, his coveralls streaked with soot and coolant, barking at a team of engineers to haul crates of experimental warheads. He glanced over his shoulder when he saw the two approaching. "You're late. The ship doesn't wait for anyone, Captain." "It waits for me," Alden said. "Where are we?" "Docking clamps will disengage in 3 minutes. Engines are cycling through sequences I don't even recognize. This thing isn't built like anything I've worked on, and believe me, I've broken down everything from rust bucket freighters to Jovian carriers. This ship, though," he trailed off, shaking his head, "it wants to move." Rebecca turned sharply toward him. "Wants? Ships don't want Maddox." Brian gave her a hollow look. "You haven't stood close enough to its core yet." That silenced them all for a moment. Around them, the thunder of activity grew. Shuttles disengaged, soldiers boarded, the black ship hummed louder, like a great predator breathing deep. Then the alarms shrieked. Red strobes flashed across the hangar as the comms officer's voice cracked over loudspeakers. "Enemy fleets inbound. Multiple jump signatures. They found us." The crowd's energy shifted in an instant. Orders barked louder. Weapons clattered as troops sprinted toward stations. The hangar bay tilted as the station lurched under the first distant impact of orbital fire. Rebecca grabbed Alden's arm. "If we take that ship out now, we're painting the biggest target imaginable on our backs." Alden met her eyes. "We're already the target. At least this way we get to fire back." The ground shuddered again. Brian cursed under his breath, tossing a wrench into his kit. "Then we better make it fast. Because whatever's out there, it's not just one fleet. It's the whole damn galaxy coming to make sure this ship never leaves port." They reached the boarding ramp, a black maw yawning open. Alden hesitated only once, his hand brushing the cold surface of the alien alloy. It pulsed faintly under his touch, like it recognized him. Rebecca's voice was low, urgent. "If this thing's alive, if it's tied to us, then it's not just power we're carrying. It's hunger. Can you control that, Alden?" He looked back at her, the weight of command, of choice, pressing heavier than any battlefield ever had. "I don't know. But we're about to find out." Behind them, the hangar groaned with explosions as another strike rattled the station. Soldiers rushed past, boarding in a flood of boots and rifles. Maddox was already halfway up the ramp, muttering calculations about stress points and reactor loads. Alden and Rebecca stepped aboard together. The ramp sealed shut. Darkness swallowed them. Then the lights inside flared with a cold, alien glow, and the black ship's voice, or something close to a voice, rolled through the hull like a whisper at the back of their minds. "We are bound. We are war." The ship's engines roared to life, tearing free of the station, a sound like nothing human had ever built. Outside, enemy fleets closed in, their armadas stretching across the stars like a wall of steel and fire. Inside, Alden gripped the command rail, Rebecca steady beside him, Maddox at the systems panel with sweat beading on his brow. And for the first time since humanity had touched the stars, they weren't running. They were holding the weapon everyone feared most, and the galaxy was about to learn if that fear had been enough. The ship surged forward, straight into the swarm of waiting warships.